20. I walked along the wide surface of centuried wall, and peered below me into the ghoul-haunted garden, as the north wind's swell washed over my yellow robe, and frolicked with my length of hair. My arms, outstretched, waved hands above the twisted trees on which enigmatic emblems had been chiselled, and I allowed my nails to trace similar insignia onto one arm. Falling to bended knee, I reached into a pocket of my robe and touched the shard of charcoal that was therein, and then, taking out the shard, I pressed its porous substance onto the surface of the wall. The charcoal had been prepared from essence of strange vegetable and animal, and its alchemical properties when in my thaumaturgic hand were profound. I drew an emblem with the black substance, and then I stood and danced in rising wind upon my icon. Lifting arms to distant starlight, I made the elder sign to whatever may sense it within the haunted heavens, and although to make that sign with one's paltry digits of flesh and bone can be a painful process, I was determined to sink into some hidden depths of Nightmare's well and find one special place. I returned the shard to its pocket and peered into Night's dark chasm, and saw the thing that fell through cosmic ether, the lean, descending one that stretched bat-like wings as it circled to our little world, and as it fell, each star touched by its tip of wing dimmed a little, or died entirely. I marvelled as a sheen of ghastly moonlight played upon the horned creature's smooth black skin, as it perched on one of the basalt towers of the antediluvian wall. Standing on my insignia, I moved fingers to the moon, and I fancied that the beast observed me, although it wore no countenance. Yet, as I stared at the place where there might have been a face, I suspected a suggestion of some sentient thing in its blackness, and as I peered more deeply into its nothingness my eyes grew heavy, and my mind began to mist. Before my eyes were completely closed, I saw the wings stretch again as the beast lifted from the tower, and I felt the air nearest me move in waves, although I heard no sound. Slippery paws, cool and damp, wrapped around my neck and ankles, as I was lifted off the wall into thin air. My jaws stretched wide so as to express with delighted howling my rapture as we voyaged beyond mundane time and space, beyond the wall of sleep, into an undimensioned region that was my intimate nightmare. And I felt the spectral atmosphere protest, as one of flesh and blood presumed to invade the world that accepted naught but dreaming psyche. I was set beside the ruins of a castle that seemed familiar, and as I studied its charred remains, a flock of smooth black things emerged from its cavities, the kindred of the night-gaunt that had stolen me from the earthly realm and brought me to my land of nightmare. They circled around and over me, and some drew near, so as to weave prehensile talons into my hair and press their blank heads to my mortal mouth. They took hold of my black hands and led me into dance beneath the pallid moon, which looked far more ghastly in this place of incubus than in my other domain. My mortal bones trembled ferociously as I danced, for they felt instantly that they were not to exist within this realm of malign demonic vision. We danced in silence, moving away from the ruined castle and down a path that led eventually into a necropolis in which there grew thick, pale willow trees. Upon one dilapidated 17th-century slab of white marble, which had been partially engulfed by the trunk of a willow that grew next to it, sat a dark thing that sucked unwholesome nourishment from a relic that had been excavated from the hoary, charnel earth. The night-gaunt that had stolen me from the waking world went to the rubbery creature and extended one impossible paw, to which the ghoul bent so as to kiss what passed as palm, and then the gaunt arose and vanished into the midnight ether, followed by its brood. "Richard!" I called as I approached the white slab, for I had known this beast in intimate dream. He gazed at me queerly, as if it had been a length of time since any voice had so saluted him, or perhaps it was the sound of my waking voice that startled the surrounding air and splintered the creature's brain with recollection. Sitting beside him, I exhaled my witch's breath onto his mouth, until finally it moved.
I have known your eidolon, but to have you here in flesh is unspeakable. You corrupt our realm with your blood and bone.
Ah, sweet corruption, I cackled. Be at peace. I have come to give you a relic of your mortal art, the gift that you have lost in ghoulishness. I know the ache that taunts what was once your mortal heart. Give me your hand. He paused for but one moment, and then held out his hand, into which I placed the shard of charcoal that I had taken from its pocket. He gazed at it with uncomprehending eyes, and so I took it from his palm and moved its porous surface across one small section of the white slab on which we sat. I stood and placed the shard into his hand once more, as he stared at the name of Pickman that I had written on the stone. His wide dark brow furrowed as he thought, and then thought transformed into recollection. Hesitantly he pressed the charcoal onto the slab and began to work. When he finished, we both admired the semblance of the face that he had worn in the waking world, for portraiture had always been his forte. "When we met in dream," I whispered, "you led me to an archway, through which I caught a glimpse of an audience void wherein one might encounter crawling chaos. Do you remember?"
I have a faint recollection,
the ghoul replied as he gazed at his sinister portrait. "Show me the place again," I commanded. The creature sighed, then shrugged.
"'Tis but a little distance."
He loped clumsily through the burying ground, and I followed, past an ancient stone church with crumbling spire, until coming at last to a lonely mausoleum, which we entered through a grating of ornate iron. Descending some few steps, we moved into a vault of marble shelving, on which there rested oblong boxes in various states of ruin. My companion lowered to his knees, and began to work at one portion of the stone floor with his strong, inhuman nails, until at last he pried open a portion of that floor that proved to be a slab covering an aperture. Violently he hurled the heavy slab away, so that it slid from us across the smooth floor, and then he leaned over the edge and gazed into the descending darkness as he wheezed from his exertion. Lifting his face to peer into my eyes, he smiled, and I saw a semblance of the man he once had been within unwholesome features. Saying nothing, he climbed into the aperture and began to scale its wall. We climbed down a cylinder of rock, finding whatever holds we could for hand and foot. I could see still, if dimly, and laughed at the silent bats that flocked about us. The air became heavy and moist the more we climbed, and it took on such a strange aura that I felt as if we were descending into a dream within a dream. I sucked in its delicious decay, as, at last, we reached a surface of damp stone floor, and I glanced about the place that looked as if it could have been a castle's dusky chamber. I watched the thing that had been Pickman glide stealthily through darkness, toward what I at first mistakenly thought to be an archway leading into a similar chamber. But then I saw the blurred semblance of his ghoulish form appear before him, and knew that his hand, outstretched, touched a surface of black and polished glass. 21. I approached the standing mirror before which the denuded ghoul stood, and admired its tarnished frame, which had been maligned by hoary age, and when I stopped beside my familiar, I noticed the rare and peculiar symbols that were embossed on the metallic border, glyphs that were emblems of occult things. Scrutinizing my muted image on the foggy glass, I disliked the refulgence of my yellow robe, that clashed with the murkiness of the silent place wherein I stood, and so I pulled it from me and let it crumple to the floor. My inky skin looked most appropriate in my surroundings, matched as it was by the rubbery tissue of my ghoul companion. I stood behind him and snaked my arms around his neck. My body pressed against his cool, inhuman hide, and I was disappointed that my action did not have the effect on him as it had upon those men who melted at my touch, nor did he shudder at the pressure of my teeth upon his neck. Thus I turned my attention to the icons embossed upon the mirror's grimy frame, and my mouth was very near Richard's tapered ear as I pronounced the language of those secret signals, and it was my whispering that moved my beast to shudder. Sighing soft laughter, I ran my fingers to his loins as I sank to knees and kissed his buttocks. I drank in his rank foetor, that rich aroma. I turned him round and kissed his impotent sex, and then clutched his flanks with my nails and tugged him to his knees. Our mouths met, and it was then that I tasted a remnant of the one thing that he desired, the decay of death with which his tongue was coated. My nail sliced his face, and his blood was so black that I could scarcely see it against his dark elastic flesh, but its redolence was overwhelming. With ecstatic tones I mouthed once more the formulae embossed upon the arch that held the dusky mirror, and as I gazed into that glass I saw the combined image of our nakedness ripple, and beyond our reflected silhouette another semblance blossomed, drifting toward us from some distant pocket of the void. It wavered like some crimson flare, an animation that flowed as fabrics, red as sunset flame. He stepped gracefully through the tarnished arch and stood before us, silent and lean and cryptically proud, and the triple crown perched upon his dome was made of an identical metal as the mirror's frame, and wore the selfsame icons. The black one offered his hand to my compatriot, who took and licked it. The black one nodded his approval, and then he lifted a foot and ruthlessly kicked the ghoul away. He then considered me and said, "You have debauched the realm of dreamland with your mortal presence in this place." "We witches are a clever brood," was my reply. "We flow where we will, and yet you cannot reach your desired destination without my assistance." I bowed my head in acknowledgment of his wisdom. Reaching out, he took hold of my hair and pulled me upward. He breathed onto my eyes, and I shivered at the diabolic vision that consumed my splintered brain. His hot hands wove into my hair and reached into my skull, and I felt him clutch my brain and hurl it forward, where it smashed through a surface of black mirror. The rank smell of blood cocooned me as my vision cleared, and I turned so as to peer dimly through the threshold into the chamber from which I had been heaved, the room where my discarded carcass was sprawled upon the blood-soaked fabric of my yellow robe. I watched the ghoul that crept to my cadaver and began to feed, and then the image of that realm of dream evaporated. A multitude of desert wind thronged about us and whispered of forgotten things. My soul was kissed by silver moonlight as we flitted across a field of sand toward a city of pillars. The strange dark one who accompanied me lifted his hand to the moon, and I watched the curtain of blood that covered the disk and transformed the desert into a plain of gore. But then the desert sand siphoned the scarlet spillage as mad auroras of bright yellow and pale green rose beyond the rim. The dark one moved his hand again, and the heaven turned mauve as the moon ignited into a disk of white inferno. We floated past the massive pillars on which I could espy the glyphs with which the tarnished frame of the black mirror had been embossed, and I could hear the enunciation of those glyphs whispered on the demon winds. We stopped before a titanic threshold of cosmic flame as earth's dust was blown away by demonic wind. The strange dark one, behind me, howled insanely, and then his horrible mouth puckered and exhaled, and my final remnant of mortality was hurled as discarded debris beyond the flaming doorway.